All right, it is 9 o'clock. For those of you that are here, I thank you and I appreciate that. I see some other people are going to probably start joining us here as their reminders are going on about what they signed up for today. But we'll kind of just get started, and as they come on board, they'll do that. Um, so hello and happy New Year. Um, this is our we do a lot of security presentations, and we usually try and put some focus on it. And our focus for this year is, really like a New Year's resolution, but like a real one, like one you're really going to keep. Like, look at what you're going to take on this year around cybersecurity and have that be part of your New Year's resolution. And I put that little picture of the person, all, happy and fulfilled with the fireworks. And I have kind of a dark sense of humor sometimes. And I was thinking, that can be the person who's done these things, or it could be the person who's excited that they were able to infiltrate your systems and take advantage in some way because you didn't. So, and that's, it's really meant to kind of talk about the reality of the situation, which is part of what this New Year's resolution is all about here, is getting clear about the state of what's happening. So that's a welcome for you. So welcome. Thanks for being here. That's me. I'm Jeremy Cherney. I'm the owner of Tobin Solutions. And today we're going to, first of all, we want to kind of jump in. And this is just a real quick exercise for everybody. Whatever you thought you were going to do in 2021 around security, whatever thoughts you had, you're going to take on, it's all in the past. We got a whole year ahead of us right now. So anything that's there for you around it, just let it go. Call it complete, be done with it, and we're going to start 2022 anew. And that starts today with what I hope for a lot of you are going to be a lot of learnings and discoveries, even if you've been to one of our security webinars before. We're going to talk about some of the risks and mitigations, and there's certainly an opportunity for Q&A along the way. So if you have something you want to put in the chat, you can go ahead and do that if you've got some questions. But mostly this will be me talking about security, giving me an opportunity to do something I really enjoy. So we actually started trademarking this phrase, security strong. So we're in the process of completing that. And it's what we look at is like, being security strong is for us, you're aware of security, you've got a plan in place, and you're tackling that plan and putting things in place. And as you go through that journey, there's some things that are more important to put in place sooner than later. Some that are just best practices, regardless of what your business is, what your organization is, or so forth. So there's just, that's why they call them best practices, I guess. So, but to the extent it's going to make a difference is going to be in the actions you take out of this in the future. So you're going to see the muscle here as our icon of being security strong, and it's tattooed here for 2022. And so when you see those, and they're all over the place, it's almost every slide in this best practices, but those are the places to start. Like, if you haven't got a pen and paper in front of you, grab one right now, because some ideas might percolate as you're coming along here. I hope they do. But start to make some notes about what you think you might want to take on or what questions you might have, so that, again, you can build the right plan for yourself. So part of today is education, and I guess it's almost all education. And so there's just certain things we want you to get, and one of them is really that security is only as good as its weakest link. A lot of times when people talk about IT security, they use the metaphor of a chain of trust, a chain of interaction, and anywhere along that place where there is a weak link, something not being tended to, whatever that is, that's likely where something's going to happen. So as we go through some of these best practices, we're talking about some of the common weak links that are out there for people, where you might want to get an action on, or maybe you are in action on, and now it's just an opportunity to go inspect and make sure it's doing what you think it's doing, or to check in on it, make sure it's still happening, whatever that is. That's all part of keeping your chain strong. The threat landscape, I could go on for hours about the threat landscape, and I'm not going to take too much time here to do that. I figure if most of you are here, you're here because you know that there's a lot of risk out there. There's a lot of threat. You may not be out there for the full extent of it, or you might think you have yourself protected in some ways from it. And maybe here just kind of to check in and see how your plan is going in comparison. You know, whatever that is, it's significant, and it's coming from all directions. It comes from the software side, comes from the end user side, it comes from the hardware side, from the cloud hosting, from hackers, you know, out to try and take your data for ransom with ransomware, to hackers that are just trying to steal your data to sell on the dark web, nation states. It takes all forms, and it's big business. And that's really the scariest part of it. Most of these hackers, this is their business model. I'm going to go hack your systems. I'm going to hold your data hostage, and I'm going to charge you lots of money to get your data back. And it's a huge business, and it can be done with very little effort. Anyone else hearing me okay? I'm hearing somebody saying they got issues with sound. Everyone else hearing me okay?
Yep.
All right, great. Sorry you're having issues, Jerry. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe check see if you're muted, or maybe restart the application or something. Yeah, there's no shortage of how deep this threat goes when money is at stake, right? And they're making, you know, it used to be, you know, they would charge you cryptocurrency. You know, they say, okay, and we're not going to get into what Bitcoin is, but needless to say, it's an equivalency of money. And money at that time, when you'd get, they'd hold your data ransom, might be the ransom would be 2 Bitcoin, which at the time might have been like $500 or something like that. Well, now they're still getting paid in Bitcoin, but the equivalency in dollars is now in the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands and the millions of dollars, depending on what they think you can afford based on your business and what kind of company you've got and just whatever they feel like charging. But again, they're a business, so you know they're not going to charge you something they don't think you can afford. In most cases, you can actually negotiate with them. They have very good customer service. They have frequently asked questions. They'll help you get Bitcoin and do those things. But that's what you're faced with. And so, you know, what are the things that you can be doing now that are the best practices that are going to do the best you can to mitigate the threats? You know, we're not going to even say prevention anymore, although we talk about prevention. It's almost impossible to have anything in here as being to assume any kind of level of 100% prevention. Something else I want you to understand is that security is a process. It is not a product. So, you know, a lot of you, when you think about security, you might be thinking about, oh, I have antivirus or I have a firewall. Those are products, and it's how those products get used that really provide the security. That's that process part of it. So I love the metaphor of the lock on the front door of my house. The lock on my front door does not provide security. What provides security is when I walk out of the house, I push the button in, I pull the door closed, and I jiggle it to make sure it's locked and engaged. It's that process that provides the security. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is process. Process of what? You know, we even talk about security. What are we talking about? It's really this, what is called the CIA triad, which is such a fun name for security, right? The CIA. But coincidentally, it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And any breach or problem in one of those areas is considered a security event. So we're not just talking about the hackers or ransomware. You know, last year at this time, Texas had a lot of issues with storms and power being cut out and flooding and things like that. That's an availability issue. If they couldn't get access to their systems because of that, for them, that was a big security issue. So you want to be thinking about it in terms of all of these. And all of these form what starts to become the different processes, the different products, how all this fits together to protect your CIA becomes that chain of trust. In the world of hacking, you're always getting attacked right now, in some way. If you have a firewall, someone's on the outside knocking on the door. If you have email, someone's trying to send you phishing emails and other things. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So you're always getting attacked. So you have to be right 100% of the time. You have to be right. Everyone on your team has to be right 100% of the time about the actions they take to deal with the threat actors. They just have to be right once. So the odds are not ever in your favor. So one of the things you want to do, this is the backstop to everything, is you want to make sure you have good cyber liability insurance. It's getting expensive. Like I said, these ransomware payouts and remediation costs, even a small incident can be $50,000. If you have to pay the ransom, it can be millions plus remediation, very expensive, plus your business downtime, all of that. And cyber liability is definitely carved out by most policies these days as a separate insurance policy or separate rider, separate premiums. So you want to look into that. You want to make sure you've got the right kind of cyber liability insurance that's going to protect you. And you're also seeing what we're seeing in the cyber liability policies, not only in our own, but the ones we review for our clients, is that there's conditions for insurability, that you have to have certain things in place. And those conditions are evolving. We had some where we had some clients where they would not, their carrier would not renew their policy unless they added multi-factor authentication to their systems. So things like that. So you want to make sure that you're following those provisions because otherwise they might not pay out. And that would be, if you're at that point where you need them to pay out, that would be super disappointing. But like I said, they're changing. The premiums are increasing, and you can keep your premium down by doing what needs to be done. So this is a great action. Call your insurance agent today if you haven't done this or checked into it lately. The zero trust security model and architecture. So we try and do things in plain language here at Tobin Solutions, and sometimes things get a little geeky. Our job is to make sure you get this so it makes sense for you. This one sometimes a little trickier to explain, but bottom line is the way that your network is designed was not probably designed with a very specific security model in mind. And that was inside your network, behind your firewall, everything is good and safe and trusted. Outside your network, outside your firewall, the internet bad, block it, and all of that. You kind of had these two worlds, the outside untrusted and the inside trusted. And the zero trust model, which is actually an old concept, but it's being renewed and you're going to be hearing about it more and more, is that inside, just because it's inside doesn't mean it's all trusted, that there still needs to be some level of proving who you are and what you do as a device, as a service, as a person, as a computer, as anything that goes on the inside of that network, and setting that up. So your phone systems, some of you have like a voice over IP phone network, and it's on the same network as your PCs, which, isn't always isn't a best practice, but it isn't always a problem. Now, from a zero trust model, you would for sure set up your phone system on a separate network, because your phones, your voice over IP phones, are basically all these little computers, right? With a handset and some push buttons on it. So like any device, then it's got software, it can have security flaws. And if your phone network ever got compromised, there was ever a problem with that device, it would impact your phone network, but it would not, it would be, since that phone network is segmented from the rest of your network, they would not be able to do what's called move laterally through the rest of your network from your phones, at least not easily, not without a lot more work. So that's a real small example, but how we're doing network design today for brand new customers is all taking into account zero trust security and automatically setting up multiple segmented networks for various components on the system. It's more complex, but it's more secure. So that's the network segmentation. I forgot I had a slide here about this. So the idea of this is to slow the spread and increase the difficulty of any attack. And sometimes it's an attack, sometimes it's a problem too. Sometimes you can have a device that can, we had a client that was manufacturing and they had a machine that had some digital controls on it. It was tied into their network, and that device was causing problems on the network. It was causing the servers to shut down because of the way it was performing. So we could actually put that manufacturing machine on a different network, still give it what it needs to work, but not impact other systems. So there's some other performance benefits that can happen from this, but for this purposes of this conversation, it's network segmentation. It's putting everything, and you can get very granular with this. The more granular you get, the more complex it gets, of course, but there's some certain basic ones we recommend, and we can discuss with you what your specific needs are so that you are having network segmentation that works for you. Um, 3-2-1 data backup best practices. 3-2-1 data backup is a best practice that has been around forever. In fact, I remember when I was selling computers back in like 1982, 83, 84, like that. And I'd be talking to people who are, oh my gosh, my age now, who seemed ancient at the time. We'd be talking about their files that would be on a floppy disk. And they were saying, you know, like a 5¼ inch floppy disk. And for some of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the floppy disk, that's the save icon in your applications. You click on that little icon, that's the save icon. That's a floppy disk. And so even then, talking to people about, okay, I've got my word processing files on this floppy disk. How do I back it up? What do I do? And even back then, this 3-2-1 data backup, you'd have 3 copies. You'd have your original files that you used on a regular basis. You'd have another copy on another disk, and you have another copy on another site. And you know, at a minimum, if everything goes perfect, that is the bare minimum you need. But what we're finding is the nature of the attacks these days, the nature of the compromise, the challenges in recovering, you would like to have a lot more than what you've got in the 3-2-1. And the way you scope out what your 3-2-1 looks like is really by looking at this graphic here where it shows, okay, there's an event. That's the security event. That's the ransomware. That's the big storm, the outage. That's the corrupt server died, something. Cloud is down, whatever's happening. And then the clock starts to tick, right? Because what do you start to do? When is it going to be back up? What's happening? When can I get my business running again? When can I start sending emails? When can I get into my accounting system? When can I start fulfilling customer orders? Clock starts ticking, right? So how quickly you want your systems back up is that recovery time objective. Most people, you know, they can, if it's a really significant thing, they can tolerate, you know, a few hours to a couple days, depending on your business. But that's usually only in extraordinary circumstances. You know, for the things that kind of happen now, if you had that happening regularly, that would be a problem for you. So again, you want to get clear what your recovery time objective is, and then how far back do you need to go? That's that recovery point objective. It used to be when, if you were infected with ransomware, you probably got infected that day. They got in that day, they started infecting it that day. So you didn't need many days of backups. Now, in some cases, you're hearing many situations where the hackers have been in for a while. They've got time. They're in the systems. They're looking around. understanding your backup systems, looking at what you've got. So if you had to restore systems from before they were attacked, that would be something, you know, you want to have sufficient backups for that. So got that. So this is another thing. You want to really look at what your backup is. And the next slide we're going to talk about is testing it. And testing it is clear. So this is a conversation. This is a process conversation. And then when you get into that and the technology is put in place and the process is put in place to get it, then you want to actually get in to be able to test it out. Again, this is another backstop. We talked about one backstop being your insurance. The backstop before that is your disaster recovery solution. If you're hit, if it's bad, if it's not an easy recovery, and we have to restore your systems from backup, this is where we get into, okay, now the rubber meets the road. How long is it going to take? Is it going to work as designed? Is it going to meet the expectations? So in the slide before, if you set your recovery time objective to be, hey, Jeremy, look, we looked at our systems and we can be down for, 8 hours. We can be down for 8 hours. That's in an extraordinary time. So that's our recovery time objective. We want our systems, disasters happen, fires, floods, even security events. But when we need to recover, 8 hours. Okay, great. That's your RTO. Now, how do we validate the RTO? We need to actually go through the process of doing a disaster recovery test. And when you think about it, it's obvious, right? It's the only way to really validate it. Otherwise, it's just a thought experiment. So the idea of doing the disaster recovery test would be, we're going to run through the test. We're actually going to recover your systems. You're going to log in, you're going to check, you're going to make sure it all looks good. And we're going to document the process and we're going to time it. And if we got it done in 8 hours to meet your recovery time objective, great. If it came in at 12 hours because of whatever, then we either have to adjust your recovery time objective, or we have to look at different technology or whatever caused it to be taking more time than we would have liked. And that's not just for your main server. A lot of you have, your emails with Google or Microsoft 365. You want to be thinking about, they have outages from time to time. It's not a lot, but when it happens, it happens. And, if it's out for a few minutes, it may not be a big deal. If it's out for 5, 6, 8 hours, that might be a problem for you. So you want to be thinking not only, you want to be thinking about kind of system by system. Where are you doing this? And if you're the person accountable for this, if you're the business owner here, the person in charge, the whoever it is, this is an area where we want you to be in action on. You want to test your disaster recovery system and know what it's capable of and whether it meets your expectations. Because a lot of people with a lot of these security events, whether it's the fire, the flood, whether it's the solar winds attack, whether it's the battery fire in a data center, whether it's the ransomware of the day, there's a lot of companies that was the first time they were ever doing their disaster recovery test live, trying to do it to get their businesses up and running. So, obviously we hope it all works, but again, if it's critical that it works, if it's when you're telling your board of directors or what you're kind of promising to yourself or to your customers or to whoever, how long you can be back up, you want to know that. So this should be a big priority for you. Maybe even after getting insurance, just doing your disaster recovery test. Let's see. So multi-factor authentication, this used to be like, hey, what are you talking about with multi-factor? But a lot of us are getting used to it now in one form or another. It is, in olden days, in olden times, it was sufficient to have a password and a good password. And in most cases, that was provided pretty good protection against getting into a system. Now we know that's not the case because there's so many ways that your password can get out of your control, or that your password can be guessed, or that your password can be exfiltrated, meaning, the hackers took it and decrypted it. However they get it, there's so many ways. Keystroke loggers, Trojans on your system where they're watching what you're doing, all of that, however they might get it, is if they don't have your phone that's got the code on it, they can't get in. Simple as that. Whether you're using your phone and you're using the code, texted to your phone, or whether you're using an authenticator application that's got the rolling 6-digit that changes every 60 seconds, or whether you use an app like what we use one for our Windows desktop logins. So when you log in to your desktop, you put in your ID and your password, and yes, you want two-factor even at your desktop, and your VPN and all of those places. But the way it works is my phone just buzzes. I look down and there's an alert that says, do you want to accept this, yes or no? And you just click the yes or no. And it's very simple. It's an extra step. Security is inconvenient. I'm sorry about that. But this is some of the best security you can get until we move away from passwords. And it's going to be a long time before a lot of systems have moved away from passwords. So you want this everywhere. You want this everywhere for all the systems you access, like your VPN, your network, your remote users, your cloud accounting system, your email system. But you also want this where you've got other information that people could use, you want two-factor authentication on your bank, right? Because that's where your money is, and you want to make sure you've got two-factor there. But you also want two-factor on your internet registrar who manages your domain. Tobinsolutions.com, we own that domain, but we register it through a registrar who maintains it so that no one else can grab it. That registrar has a login ID and password, and it's protected by two-factor authentication, so that someone can't go in and hijack my domain. You want to go into your mobile phones and if you got Verizon, log into your Verizon account and make sure two-factor authentication is turned on for your phones, for your account. So people can't transfer your phone number and do what's called a SIM jack, where they transfer your phone number to a different phone or to a different SIM. So you want to be checking this for everywhere. All the systems you use, internally, externally, you want to be turning on that multi-factor authentication. Please do that. Patching best practices. So this is still, you look at that stat in bullet point 4, says a lot. 70% of organizations that suffered a security breach cite a known vulnerability that went unpatched. Patching is when we update the software. You run the latest updates, you run the security updates for your Windows operating system, your Macs, your Microsoft Office, all your applications. There's software updates to patch on your firewall and on your server and other things, right? Sometimes it's being patched because there's new features and functions. A lot of times it's being patched because there's security holes that are being fixed. And so you want to be doing that on a regular basis. One of the, which one was it? Was it Experian? Which credit agency got hacked a few years ago? The colossal reason why they got hacked and how they disastrously handled that breach. But one of the big 3 credit reporting, which one is it? Experian, I think. I don't want to besmirch the wrong one. But one of them, they started with, someone got in through a website that had a back-end service that was using a particular program that was not patched. Had they patched it, they wouldn't have been able to get in. Cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. Headaches for so many people. Equifax, thank you. Amanda just sent me that. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, Equifax. I gotta remember that one. So this is critical, and it's tough because there's so many on your systems. I mean, you've got the Windows, you've got Adobe, you've got Microsoft. There's probably 30, 40 different companies that have different things that need to be patched and updated. You know, sometimes we're just catching up. You know, there's what's called a zero-day exploit, meaning that there is someone out there is attacking a system using software that is not patched, or it's an unknown vulnerability at the time. So there isn't even a patch available. So it's called a 0-day. Oh, someone's got their phone ringing there. You can all mute yourselves, please. The complexity of it is staggering sometimes. And these 0-day exploits, you also need a mechanism to be able to do it quickly. That's also part of the challenge. So sometimes, in order to fix some of these 0-day exploits, the patch comes out and they're like, you know, patch as soon as you can, which means there's a little time for testing. You might have to roll it out to, you know, in our case, we're rolling it out to thousands of computers for all the companies that we support. Someone's got to be able to do that and do that quickly. Sometimes it's more challenging depending on what the issues are. Sometimes they're an easy patch where you can just run a quick update. Sometimes they require manual configuration and extra work, scripting, and other things. It's a challenge. It's hard to be perfect with patching. You're almost always going to have something that's slightly out of patch compliance. But in general, you know, you want to stay as complete as you can. So if you're not looking at, if your systems are not being patched regularly, and map this onto this whole conversation from 9 o'clock until now and going forward. This goes for your home computer. Everything I'm saying goes for your family computers. If you're managing, if you're the person that helps your parents or your grandparents or your kids or whoever you are, if you help your church, like all of these things, think about this for them as well. But you want to be patching regularly, you know, so we're watching for things, you know, most cases we're patching something at least monthly, and in most cases weekly, something is getting patched. But you need to have a process around it. That's a process thing. I was talking before about passwords and multi-factor authentication. Again, we're still in kind of a password world. So, you know, people are looking at different solutions for not having passwords. But there's, like I said, it's going to be around for the foreseeable future in a lot of ways. So until then, we're going to need something that's going to help us manage those passwords securely, because the idea of a password being reused somewhere is extraordinarily high. You know, the problem with that is if one company gets breached and those passwords escape, you know, if, like, let's say, you know, I think Adobe had a password breach at one point, and the passwords actually were available. And if you didn't know that Adobe had a password breach, you know, this was years ago, you didn't know that, you wouldn't have known to go and change your Adobe password. But if I was also using that same password at Amazon, you know, the hackers are going to try that password everywhere. They're going to have my email address. They're going to have my password. They're going to try it on all the popular websites. So, you know, the issues are real when it comes to passwords, and they're a pain. These long passwords, the complexity of them, and all that. So, but there are some best practices, and you want to, you know, adopt as many of these as you can. So, you definitely want strong passwords. That's just a term for a password that's hard to guess or hack. So, strong passwords. So, don't use a single dictionary word or a common phrase. You know, don't use monkey or monkey123, but you do want to include some special characters in most cases. There's a lot of schools of thought and methodologies of creating good long passwords. For some people, it's stringing together like 5 long words that are not commonly found in the dictionary. But 20 characters or longer. padding is a great way to use a longer password. You know, I don't know how many of you remember the movie War Games back in the 80s. That was, I mean, that was like such a great movie. Matthew Broderick, and you know, the computer geek gets the girl, saves the world. I mean, that was, I was in heaven with that movie. I was so identified with that guy, and you know, is who I wanted to be. And you know, in that movie, you know, it all culminates to the moment where the weapons computer, the Whopper, is trying to guess the password to launch the nuclear missiles, and they're trying to stop it. And they've got this big, huge scrolling password counter thing on the screen. And every time the Whopper computer guessed one of the characters of the password, it would show that it got it, and it was still trying to guess the others. That is not at all how password guessing works. Password guessing works by, it tries it and either knows it works or it doesn't work. It doesn't know about the length. It doesn't know if you used a long one or a short one. It doesn't know if you used special characters or not. I mean, obviously when you're creating the password, it can tell all that, but to the person trying to guess the password, they have no idea what's wrong in most cases, unless they get help from the website telling them specifically what's wrong. So in some cases, you can actually have a shorter password. Maybe you've got a pretty decent password that you like. Just add like 10 periods to the end of it. That would provide a lot of security right there. You still don't want to use that on every website, but right there would give a lot of password security right there. And then using a password manager is also a great option. The password managers can actually help you create passwords. So they'll help you create these hard to guess passwords. It'll store them for you in a secure database. It'll make them so you can copy and paste them, you know, easy into websites and applications. It lets you share them internally where you might need to share them, which is great. It lets you claw them back when you need to. So if you're giving passwords to your team and for some reason they're not on your team anymore, you can, you know, take back the password account and they don't have all the passwords anymore. We use this as an emergency mode. So one of the password managers we use is called LastPass, and it has what's called an emergency feature. So we use LastPass for our family. And so my wife and I have it, and the way it's set up is I have my password account and she has her password account. And she can request emergency access to my account. And I think I have it set up for like 8 hours, or maybe it's 24 hours. If I don't respond to that request within 24 hours, she'll get access to my account. And that would be super handy if I am dead or in a coma or went down in a plane and I'm sitting on a desert island somewhere, whatever that might be, where she would have access to my passwords, need access to my passwords. That's what we'd want. That's what I want for her. So I use that feature. So that's another great reason of why to use a good password manager. So another good action to take is to go ahead and look at those password managers and start to change those passwords and stop reusing passwords across systems if you're doing that. User account best practices. This one, people started changing on this a while ago, but we still see it come up in different ways. So we want to make sure people are clear about it. So when you log into your computer and you're given your ID and password, that allows you to log into the network and allows you to use the systems as you've been allowed to use them, which in most cases you can run the software, you can get at your data and do things like that. Ideally, that's about what you could do with it, because that's all you really need to do your job on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you needed to do something like install software or make some other computer changes that required administrative access, we'd want you to use a separate account for that, not the same account you're using on the day-to-day. Why do we say that? Because if you're using the same account for day-to-day, and that's also your administrator account, then anything you do on that computer, you're doing as an administrator. So you might accidentally delete a folder, right? We've all done that. You could delete a lot if you're an administrator. If you happen to be having a weak moment and you fall prey to a phishing attack and you click on something you shouldn't have clicked on and installed some software you didn't want to install because it was an attack, you're able to do that because you're an administrator. Whereas if you're a regular user, you wouldn't be able to install that software. And you look at that fifth bullet point. In one study, running as a standard user would prevent attackers from exploiting 94% of the critical vulnerabilities Microsoft patched that year. So that's powerful. So you want to be looking at that. You want to be looking at that. You want to be looking at least privilege policies is what we call that. Only giving people the rights that they need, the least amount of rights they need to do their job, especially when it comes to installing software and managing the computers. And we can audit that for you if you want to look at that. Security awareness training. Oh my gosh, there are so many technologies out there for anti-spam, anti-phishing, firewalls that inspect every bit of everything that comes through, the junk folders, the this and that. It still gets through. It's amazing. I mean, so much is blocked. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's millions of email messages trying to get through to you on a weekly basis. And a small fraction is getting through, but just that small fraction is hundreds. And that can be the spam that's still getting through. That can still be the phishing emails. It's remarkable. It's remarkable that they have not been able to stop that. And I, on the other hand, as someone who knows how to program computers, I also get the nature of the problem, which is that security was never built into email to begin with. We're trying to add it on afterwards. And it's not easy, and it's fraught with pitfalls and fraught with it breaking things if you do it wrong and all of that. So nevertheless, email is still going to get through. There's still people trying to text you called smishing, using the SMS messaging service on your phone, trying to text you something. There's the voicemails, the vishing. Those are still getting through, regardless of what people, all the different mitigations we're putting in place, stuff's still getting through. So it is up to the people getting those ultimately to make the right choice in that moment of choice. And remember what I said is hackers only have to be right once. You have to be right 100% of the time. No one's gonna be right 100% of the time. I am sorry. It can't be done. But if there's any shot at getting close to it, it is through security awareness training. You have got to be teaching your people about what to click on, what not to click on, what to do if they suspect something, how do they do it if they're remote and working from home, and how to keep it top of mind. Like not just, Jeremy, we did include some security awareness training at our yearly meeting. We had somebody come and talk for a half hour. That's great. And if you haven't done that, have me in. I'd love to do that. And a half hour is only going to provide so much effectiveness. Really, there should be training and testing and alerts and newsletters. We want people's high alert on this because it's coming through every day. So I'm not saying you need to have them trained every day, but you want messaging, something that's touching them multiple times a week in some way, whether it's training, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a reminder, whether it's a poster that you put by your water cooler. We have posters you can put up, like anything that's going to something that's going to interrupt the cycle, that's going to have their attention, that they are part of the neighborhood watch, that they're part of your security process. They're part of your security product. They're part of the solution. That it really is part of your culture. Hey, this is everybody's responsibility. You all got to keep an eye out on this. This is important to the success of our company, to the success of our organization. Because if we are hit with a major security event, it could cost us money. It could cost us our operations. It could cost us, for sure, lots of time, maybe reputation damage. Who knows? Big pain in the you-know-what. Expensive pain in the you-know-what. So you want to really have this as be part of your internal public service announcements. and just keep on it. We have some programs around this. We have different ways we can help you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel on this, but it's an important part of that chain of trust to shore up. Another thing to keep reminding people, in some cases, you know, as far as security and that C-level suite, you are the chief reminder officer when it comes to security. Anywhere money's being transferred, that's where the, you know, it's all about the Benjamins, right? Talking about the money and the ransomware and wire fraud and all of that. They're trying to get money in some way in most cases. So you got to watch where the money is going in and out. So any money wires, transfers, credit cards, any requests for accounts payable, anytime you want to make sure you've got a written policy around this. And if someone makes a request for money, you want to call them up and say, did you really want me to wire $10,000 to this? Are these really the wiring instructions? Or did you really want me to go buy these 10 Amazon gift cards? Whatever the request is. I mean, you know, obviously you guys, something you have to sort out because you all deal with money in a day in, day out basis. You got to figure out what works for you. Maybe it's an amount you set as a threshold. Maybe it's money. I don't know. But you want to have some process on here. You want to write it down. You want to educate the people in charge now, and you want to make sure you're including it in all education of new employees and their onboarding if they're going to be touching the money. You want to be including security conversations in your onboarding process. You're telling them, back here, you want to be including security in your onboarding process. That's my invitation. You know, you got your onboarding process. Here's where you park. Here's where the bathrooms are. Here's how you make coffee. Here's how you request vacation time. Here's how you respond when you think we're under threat. Here's the type of training we're going to be giving you around looking out for security. Telling you, make it part of your culture, make it part of your onboarding. So we talked a lot about processes. There are still the different supporting technologies that you got to have, right? I talked about security as a process, not a product. My process when I leave my front house is I engage my lock, I close the door and I jiggle the handle. It's the process that's giving me security, but I'd have nothing to lock or jiggle if I didn't have the lock in place, right? So you still have to have some of these technologies in place. They're essential, but they're not a solution unto themselves, right? There's the process behind all of these, making sure you've got business grade antivirus solutions, anti-spam, firewall, detection and response systems. Now, the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning is coming to and meeting antivirus software in a new way to look at what's happening on your system to see if they can find anything fishy going on and report that. Fishy like, hey, it looks like you've got ransomware. Let's try and catch it early. Or it looks like there's some software on here that doesn't look right. I don't know what it is, but it's not something that's been here before. You know, it looks like it's trying to send emails. What's going on there? Things like that, that detection and response backed by the AI and ML. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. Virtual private networks, you know, how are you getting into your office remotely? You know, we're in this world of the grand experiment of working from home during COVID. In some cases, a lot of you are still working remotely or have that flexibility now. Tobin became mostly a remote workforce. We skinnied down our office and we only have a few people that go in now. So how we remote in and how we connect to each other and how we do that whole remote conversation, critical. Segmented network, we talked about that. You've got to have the right kind of gear to be able to do that kind of segmented network. Making sure that you're doing your cloud recovery, your ability to recover in the cloud, and you can actually recover to the cloud as part of your disaster recovery. What you're doing around your identity access and management, that's passwords, that's multi-factor authentication, things like that, because we're seeing is no one just has like one account anymore, right? You've got accounts and passwords all over the place for all the different systems. Just want to make sure you've got some things in place for that, because that's an area where like in identity access and management, the more difficult it is, the more complex, the more inconvenient, the more likely it is people are going to share credentials, do that, try and get around it and break your security, leave you exposed in some way. Maybe with the best of intentions, but it happens. Ultimately, you got to know what you got to know about your own systems. So I'm talking about best practices in a broad sense. And most of these are going to apply to you in just the way I've described them. And there's what makes sense specifically for your organization. So you really do, if you really want to customize this, if you really want to make sure it's ticking all the boxes on your cyber liability policy, if it's ticking on all the boxes that keep you awake at night, if it's ticking all the boxes on contracts you have with customers or partners, anything where you've got compliance needs, you take credit cards or you have healthcare information, whatever that is, you want to go through, make sure you've got policies around what you need, check your compliance. We look at your response plans, we look at the best practices. We're almost certainly going to uncover some blind spots for you. It's just part of it. It's not always an immediate issue, but almost certainly something you'll want to attend to on the roadmap somewhere. And sometimes we uncover really big blind spots, things you're going to want to attend to immediately. So it's good to know that. We also do vulnerability assessments as part of this. This is where we use some automated technology to scan your networks, looking at the devices and looking for vulnerabilities on those devices, looking for vulnerable versions and holes in the security. We can do penetration testing if that's necessary. Ultimately, what you're going to get is a report on the assessment with the results of what we found in the different areas that we checked, and ideas and budgets for remediation. That's another great action you can take. For some of you, you're like, Jeremy, there's a lot here. I don't even know where to start. Journey begins with one step, and that first step is to figure out where you're going, get that roadmap in place. And so getting this going would be a great place to get moving. There might be things you take on right away. There might be things you take on over the next 24 months. Whatever it is you get to say, we just want to make sure that you're moving forward and you're taking meaningful steps forward in mitigating your risks and your vulnerabilities, and being able to keep using your systems for the way they're designed, and keeping your business operating, causing better business outcomes, and not worrying about security problems. You want to be thinking about this for not your business only. What about your critical partners? We all have like supply chain weirdness going on, right? Some of that is, way beyond our control, right? If you got a boat sitting somewhere out in the Pacific with your stuff on it, I'm very sorry for you. It causes us issues in delivering even what we've got to deliver. So they're clearly, when a partner can't deliver, it's a problem. So what if that partner can't deliver, not because they haven't got the product, they can't deliver because they've had a big cyber incident and their business is shut down. So who are your key partners? What's their security posture? Have they been to a conversation like this? If not, an opportunity would be to invite some of your partners in, and I can go through this with them as well. Be a nice add-on to help them and ensure that if they're really a critical partner, that they're starting to get their roadmap together and where they stand inside of this. It could be critical partners. It could be critical customers. Where are your critical customers? If they're shut down because of a big security incident, can't pay their bills, can't operate, whatever might be going on, what's the impact to you? I mean, it's up to them what they do, but you could provide support. Maybe they don't know where to start. Maybe they're kind of like you, just kind of in the inquiry of it. You can share this plan with them. Same thing, if you want to have a conversation with them, we're happy to help you have that conversation. But it's something to check in. But ultimately, it starts with you. And this is like, insert New Year's resolution here, right? Whether it be weight loss, or cleaning up that closet, or cybersecurity. Like, we all have our ideas. We may even sit down and get some plans going. We might even already gotten to the gym a few times. And it's hard to believe we're already at the end of January here. And I know I already have some resolutions that are not quite where I said they would be by now. But I know why they're not. It's because I haven't gotten them on my calendar, or they're on my calendar, but I'm not taking the action. So it really is just a matter of, you've got some to-do items here. You've got some areas to check in. You've got some resources. Pick anything. Doesn't even make a difference what. You know, as long as you're moving forward in something, it's going to all help that chain of trust. You'll ultimately get through it all. But it does start with that one step. So, you know, there's 7 days of the week. Some day is not one of them. And so an action you can take right now in the last few minutes as I wrap up and thank you for being here today is just put something on your calendar, even if it's just to go back to review your notes for today, or to look for the survey that we're going to send you on this, because your feedback's valuable. And when you send the survey, you'll get a copy of the slide deck and a link to the video. Maybe it'll be a reminder to go watch it again. Yeah, I don't know. Some action that's going to forward you succeeding on your New Year's resolutions. You know, set those goals, start taking the actions, and keep working through it. So, and in the world of interpretation, I'm interpreting this as, okay, great, Jeremy, this is exactly what I needed. I'm inspired. I've got some good places to look. I'm going to take it on. So if that's you, great. Thank you for being here. If you're still not sure, if you're in some other space, you know, or even if you're like more concerned than when you came in, you know, give me a call. You've got my contact information here. Definitely subscribe to our social media. We love that because it's a great way to connect with people around tips and security topics and other things we think might be useful. And again, if you think this conversation would be useful inside your organization, if you think it'd be useful with your clients or business partners or your church group or your, you know, the nonprofit that you sit on or anything like that, anywhere in your world where you think a conversation like this would be useful, let me know, because it's something I really enjoy doing, and love the opportunity to talk to you about what that looks like. We can even customize it around certain things. We can extend the length of it. We can shorten the length of it. A lot of nice options with it. So very flexible. And that is what I have. So be security strong. Go take on your New Year's resolutions. Be well, be safe, be warm, or be cold, however you want to be. But stay well in this chilly day, and be safe. And thank you for being here. And watch for our next webinar coming up in February. Thanks so much.